Greetings, I'm Craig Martin, a 48-year-old South African midlife manic business owner and investor. And I really enjoyed this budget speech, I must say. It wouldn't be a Tito Mboweni speech without quoting some scripture. 1 Corinthians 9 verse 24. Do you not know that those who run a race all run, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you win. Really don't know what that's got to do with it, because at the start of the speech, the only winners we saw was those gleeing in the back of the ANC cabinet, smiling because they haven't been prosecuted yet for the corruption. But I must say the budget speech didn't deliver so many specifics around Mboweni's economic reform plan, but I was very pleased that it didn't take the easy target of increasing VAT and increasing personal taxes. And that's what we were all dreading and expecting. But yeah, there were the sin tax increases. That's great. The budget hasn't gotten us out of the deficit, and I'm sure that it's not enough to stop us from an investment downgrade. We're still having to service about 5 billion rand a day in debt, and we're going to achieve at least a 371 billion deficit. So while there was a lot of rhetoric around clamping down on the wage bill, I'm sure that's not going to be an easy task, and so I don't expect the deficit to be less than that. I'm not convinced the ANC is actually living in reality. I mean, they're talking about bullet trains and things, and now sovereign debt funds. We can't even afford to service our debt. I mean, the sovereign wealth fund that started today has a target of 30 billion rand or $2 billion or so. I don't know. Maybe we should start thinking about paying our debt before we start thinking about saving. But anyway, the continued rhetoric and proposal seems to be at odds with the economic and fiscal realities. So in the budget speech, they spoke about a 3.5% sub-Saharan African growth forecast. And in that context, they say South Africa will achieve about 0.9%. And that's about half of the actual population growth, which is about 1.6, 1.7%. So, and inflation 4.5% in 2020. So the nation really is heading towards that 4.5, certainly more than 4 trillion debt by 2023. So we're a dynasty that's in its dying days. And if we did increase taxes, it doesn't necessarily mean that we were going to get an increase in revenue. So I think the right moves were made. The budget projects that 2021 revenue will be about 1.6 trillion or 29.2% of GDP. That's a good number, but unfortunately on the expenditure side, it wasn't low enough. So there is growing concern that South Africa has reached its limit in terms of the tax revenues that it can extract from taxpayers. I mean, we've got a very small base. Increasing VAT is just going to affect the poor, so it was really the right move. If you know about the Laffer Curve, named after the American economist Sir Arthur Laffer, it basically shows the relationship between the tax rate and revenue collected. And the curve has been around for centuries, but it illustrates that there's a certain point where higher taxes don't necessarily translate into higher revenues. And in fact, higher taxes can result into tax evasion, tax avoidance and things. And so regardless, even if the revenue is achieved, it still means a 370.5 billion rand deficit for 2021. So against that backdrop, the backdrop of corruption, misappropriation, people that aren't accountable, the fact that we only have about 6.5 million taxpayers that are supporting 56 million people, of which 18 million are on social grants, there was no option but not to increase taxes. Otherwise, I think we're going to head with problems with a country like Greece. I mean, Greece was once a big dynasty where tax rates were low, revenues were high, but this country of Mediterranean islands, through the bad years when tourism ended and shipping industry took a hit, eventually taxes started pushing up. There was a brain drain, which we see in South Africa. We saw about 98,000 people leave last year. Professionals in Greece also left for European countries, and they had this culture of tax avoidance and tax evasion. We don't want to get into that sort of situation. So the Laffer Curve basically illustrates that the end of a dynasty, taxes are high and revenues are low, and that's kind of where I see us. I mean, Greece's VAT rate was 24%. If we went down that road, that's probably where we could have ended up. Anyway, so we're a long way from 24%. We've stayed at 25%. We were once the biggest economy on the African continent. We had the best growth, but we're far from that now. So how does 15% VAT rate compare to other African countries? I don't know if you knew this, but from the 1st of January this year, 2020, Zimbabwe is actually at a lower tax rate than us. They went down from 15 to 14.5%. Namibia, Swaziland, Mauritius, they're all at 15%. Mozambique slightly higher at 17%. Angola recently introduced VAT, their rate's 14%. Zambia and Kenya are at 16%, Botswana is lower at 12%, and Nigeria has just increased from 5 to 7.5%. So no increase in that context, I think, was very good. The other positive thing is company tax. At 28%, we're on the high end, and there's talk that we should reduce. And I mean, I think we have room to reduce to about the global average of 24% over a few years. At the same time, dividend withholding taxes should probably also be abolished, and dividends should probably be taxed in the hand of the recipient, but that's something else to discuss. But at least I'm glad that we're thinking about reducing corporate tax rates. It's going to be great for equity markets and for smaller companies as well. Section 21 and public benefit organizations came under the microscope, and that's good as well because there is some abuse in this area. So well done on not too bad a budget. I mean, VAT could have been an easy target as it contributes over 25% of tax revenue, and it said that every 1% would add about 25 billion to the fiscus each year. But remember the Laffer Curve. Doesn't necessarily mean it will translate into that. In fact, anecdotal evidence seems to tell me that the move from 14 to 15% put a lot of taxpayers under pressure. In fact, there were a lot of compromise offers that were put forward to SARS. SARS hasn't always responded to these within the 21 days, and some of these companies are no longer around. So I think it's a good move. Anyway, this is Craig Martin. If you enjoyed my content, please subscribe below, and I'll post some other videos on the budget speech. Thanks for watching.